Welcome to my channel everyone. Bitcoin is currently trading at $115,665. In this video we are going to talk about Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP and Solana. Things remain exciting, so make sure to watch until the end. And if you also want to start trading with cheap takeoff fees, then I can recommend you the crypto exchange mexc, so 100 tokens, 0 fees. And here you have a huge list of altcoins which you can trade without any kind of fees. Those coins are rotating, so basically in the next days you will see other altcoins or even Bitcoin and Ethereum. They are also coming sometimes into that rotation. Then you can trade those coins without any kind of fees. For the other coins, you have to pay 0.04% fees. And if you want to save there 20%, then you can use my referral code, which you can find in the video description. So let's just start with Bitcoin. So we have said about Bitcoin, 116,680. Once they break to the upside, chances high that we should see the $117,800. This didn't happen, and this is also not a big deal. Why that? Because we are on the short side. In 1 hour, Jerome Powell is going to release the rate cut and is also going to have a speech. So basically today is going to get very volatile. My target is for Bitcoin for the next weeks, 110,160 US dollar, which is an end of a fair value gap. If Jerome gives us a 0.5% rate cut, then I would say all of those scenarios which are bearish are going to get invalidated. Same goes for the altcoins. Then we should see a huge push, and afterwards we can see if this is going to happen or if we are going for higher prices. That's what the chart is going to tell us afterwards. If we are just going to see a 0.5% rate cut, then I think this is going to get in play. And basically, if we are not going to see any kind of rate cut, I'm also not thinking about this. I still think 0.25%, what also the market forecasted, is very realistic. But if we don't see one, then we should see a huge crash. So basically, there's nothing for me to do. I still have to wait for the $114,388 breaking to the downside sustainable. So sustainable means we get a breakout, several candle closes on the 1 hour chart lower than the price mark, afterwards a nice retest. And I'm always jumping into trades once I see the retest. This is counting for my first entries. If I'm already in a short position, which is in good profits, then I can play a bit more risky, but this is always the preferred scenario. So if I want to increase my position size and if I'm patient, then I always use the retest also for position size increasement for this kind of push. And then I think 111,600 US dollar, or even the old support box of $110,700 to 110,236 US dollar is going to get in play. And from there we have to see if we are going to see a bounce or if we are also going to break to the downside. So basically you can't see the red trend line which I have put here on the chart, but basically it means once the 110,230 US dollar breaks to the downside, then I think 101,160 US dollar is going to get in play with a very high chance. For now we don't know if we are going to sell off. So basically this is just in speculation. This is not, it's not connected to any kind of chart patterns. Yeah, we still have to develop it. And yes, this can also develop as an future head and shoulders formatation. Then we have a target once we have this chart pattern on the chart. So let's move on to Ethereum. So for Ethereum, we have said it is most likely the chance that we are going to see the 4,580 US dollar where we have resistance, but we don't have to get there. We can also sell off earlier. So far, we were very close to it. So we were missing it by around about $30. I can still imagine that Ethereum is going to get into that area and sells off from here, unless we get a 0.5% rate cut. Once we get one, then I think the 4,581 US dollars is going to break to the upside, and then we have to look for long entries for Ethereum. So far, there's not much to say. The target is still ongoing, 4,256 US dollar. There is a support. Once we break it also to the downside, the next supports are here between 4,100 US dollar to 3,980 US dollar. But we still have the targets from our old rising wedge in orange, which already broke to the downside. Yeah, we just adjusted the target a bit So basically what we usually do, most bearish target is always the spread of the rising wedge. Instead of putting that to the breakout point, we always put it to the retest point. And if the retest point, we are not going to retest up here, then this pattern is going to get invalidated. But once we get a higher point, and the higher point is right here, then we are going to take the spread and put it to the highest point after the breakout. So here's the breakout. Here is a higher point, so basically the retest. Here is even a far higher point. So basically Ethereum is still bearish, but it's less bearish than before. Before the target was 3.2k, round about that. Now the maximum bearish target is 3.5k. And if we take the mid-range target, $3,786, this is an area where I would say there's also a huge fair value gap between those price marks. Unless we don't see any kind of bullish rate cut, so 0.5%, we should sell off there in the next days and weeks. So we will get to XRP. So for XRP, we have said we are currently in a bear flag. That bear flag is going to break to the downside at the price mark of $2.99. So basically a discounter price. Once we break it to the downside, and once we break the $2.96 to the downside, then I think we are going to get the target of $2.90, because that is the target of the first bearish chart pattern, this head and shoulders formatation. We also have to say that we have currently 3 different head and shoulders formations. This one up here already got in play, and we went into the target. The target here of that target of that chart pattern was the $2.97. So let me delete this out of the chart. We went there. So then we have a bigger head and shoulders formatation. This one right here. Target ongoing. It's a bit lower than $2.90, but $2.90 is a good resistance support. So basically we should see that price mark. But what I can also imagine is that this here can be the left shoulder. This can be here the head. And this here is the right shoulder. So far, this is a bigger head and shoulders formatation. And if we are just going to take the target of that in its maximum extension, so from the head to the neckline, and we put it here to the breakout point, then we have another target directing us into $2.72. Our speculation was once the $2.90 breaks to the downside, the next relevant support is at $2.66. But we need chart patterns which are directing us into that area. Yes, we had an old rectangle. Rectangles are unique, so we usually break them to the upside or to the downside. But the other target, so the first target is here, the second target is down below here. We get into one of those targets. We can also overshoot it, you see it, but the target to the downside is still ongoing. It doesn't mean that we have to sell off there in one go. It means that sooner or later, and the latest point is the bear market, then we should see that target, because this target is still ongoing. But yeah, we have to see. I think the $2.96, they are essential to hold. If they break to the downside, that's why we make this trend line red. Then the head and shoulders formatation, the bigger one, is going to get in play. $2.72 is pretty close to $2.66. If we are really that bearish, then we are going to develop more chart patterns, bearish ones, in the future. Like, for example, this bear flag. And then we have far lower prices, targets, and then maybe even the $2.66. Once we lose the $2.66, then we have to see where it's going to go, because then XRP is most likely to get far lower prices. And I'm talking here about another minus 20 to 30% once we are right here. So it can mean that XRP can sell off 40 to 50% to the downside. If we now look over Solana, then you can see rising wedge, broke to the downside, got its retest. Target was down below here, 229 US dollar. Yeah, we went there very close to it, to 230 US dollar. This was also on the chart because we had there a fair value gap which should get filled. Let me take out the target out of the chart. I have adjusted the bear flag from yesterday a little bit because of some spikes. So basically this right here is our bear flag. Once it breaks to the downside, and the current price mark is the 232 US dollar and 50 cents, then we are also going to move the target, which is the length of this sell-off. We put it here to the breakout point. Target is also going to get adjusted a bit. $214 for Solana. So also, once we see a 0.5% rate cut, this chart pattern or the whole bearishness in the whole crypto market is going to get invalidated in my opinion, but just on the short term. On the longer term, it means that yes, we can get up 20-30% to the upside once we see 0.5% rate cuts. Afterwards, still a sell-off should happen. We have many fair value gaps lower than us. I also don't speculate that we have a 0.5% rate cut. I'm still saving myself if it's going to happen with not even stop losses. I'm not using stop losses for this case. I'm using forced liquidation. That means that I'm currently in my short trades, and instead of setting stop losses, I just take out the money from my futures account. So I still let the trades run, but I'm having so less money on the account that once we see a 0.5% rate cut and the market is going to push 10 to 20% within a few seconds, yeah, it can happen within a few seconds, then I don't want to wait and click on the close button, or my stop losses are not going to get hit because there are no orders to fulfill my stop loss. Then actually I'm going to get in huge losses. This can happen. That's why I will do forced liquidation in this case. So taking out all my money from my futures account, so much that I still say I'm ready to lose it, and it is still healthy to keep the trades. Like taking out all of the margin can also mean that we are going to get liquidated far too early before we sell off. So keep that in mind. It's going to get very volatile today, and we see each other in the Sui, Avalanche, HBAR, and Dogecoin update.